There's an account on Instagram that I run into every so often, uh, and his content stands out amongst all of the players and collectors and manufacturers and builders and repair specialists. His content, seemingly every post has me laughing out loud with my morning coffee. He goes by the handle Frettie Mercury, Frettie, Freddie Mercury. And of course, I was intrigued because I've been a lifelong Queen fan. And great name. His real name is Tom Dalia, and his forte is CNC and CAD design in the guitar world. Uh, Manufacturing everything from tools to parts for companies looking for specific items. Tom has also developed some courses on the CNC production and CAD design software, one for acoustic guitars, one for electric, and then one from the CAM language that drives the CNC machines to produce these parts and full guitars, from the necks all the way to the bodies. Fascinating stuff. One of Tom's posts on Instagram called out the Luth Group online, Looth, and I was intrigued. It's a community of luthiers around the world who share anything from tips and tricks to tools and the use of tools like CNC machines. Incredible stuff, incredible resource, and for the price, uh, really hard to turn down if you're any involved with guitars, repair, manufacturing. I would definitely suggest the Luth Group. When I reached out to Tom, he was very interested in joining me in a conversation, and not half as interested as I was. It's a very new world for me, what he does, and I was happy to have him. Very informative, and God, I wish I had the skill that he has in remembering names. He has so many great stories about his coming through the industry and where he's at today and where he's going to go in the future. Please enjoy. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining me, man. And I mean, I follow your Instagram account, and I see you on the Luth group all the time. You're a busy dude, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Okay.
It's been a wild ride, but we're still making it. We're still making it work. I'm busier than ever,
Cool.
so we like
Very
that.
cool. I always surf, the social media in the mornings with my coffee, and one of your posts came up on Instagram. And being a guitar repair specialist, I had to laugh. It was about doctoring up the customer's guitar before they show up.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and your irreverence and your humor is in every post. And then being a huge Queen fan since I was a kid, of course, Freddie Mercury, in your case, Frettie, Freddie Mercury rang a bell with me, and I was like, I have to follow this guy.
yeah, yeah. It's funny when I was going out to shows, a lot of people would come up and be like, "Hey, you're Freddie Mercury," and I'm like, "Oh, my name's Tom, but like, yeah, it's nice to meet you." So I'll have people call me Freddie. Like Morgan Kelsey, he's a builder. And I think he's in Massachusetts now, or maybe New York now, but he used to be from Connecticut, which is where I'm originally from.
Cool.
So he took one of the classes recently, and he's calling me Freddie, and I'm like, I don't think he realizes it, and I'm like, no, he totally knows that that's not my real name, but it works out. It's identifiable. So
Absolutely.
so before Ian was Ian Hates Guitars, he was Martin Luthier King, which I thought was hysterical. And so I wanted something along the lines of that. So I kind of searched around. I wanted Lex Luthier, but
Nice.
there's another guy in Michigan who has that. So, and he's not very active, but I've kind of leaned into the Freddie Mercury thing, and it works out pretty well. So,
The marketing implications are endless with it.
yeah, exactly.
For the listeners, I should say that Ian Hates Guitars. Ian is the guy who monitors and created, I believe, the Luth group on Patreon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He used to do. He's kind of getting out of it now. He does like lessons on it, but his finish repair
Okay.
is unbelievable. Like it started to cause people to kind of question the authenticity of vintage instruments because he was so good at hiding headstock breaks on old Gibsons and
Wow.
neck resets, and you know he started putting carbon fiber into things and hiding the carbon fiber headstock repairs and all this stuff. And then he got real lonely over COVID, and
Mm.
that spawned the Luth group. And so I joined that pretty early on, and it's grown huge. I try to participate when I can. So every once in a while, I'll try to do like a CNC thing or a CAD thing if my schedule permits. But yeah, there's some good people on there. I love people that are on there. I suggest it to everybody. People are like, oh, like, how should I get into this? Like, how should I go to a Lutheran school? And I'm like, if I went and did this all over again, I would never go to the Lutheran school that I went to.
Okay.
I would just go straight to the Luth group. The people that are there, they're not after the money in your pocket.
That's
They're
right.
just there to help you. So that would be like one of the huge changes that I would have made. But I highly recommend to anybody who is trying to get into this to go that route first. It's going to be a lot more cost effective. I mean, I
Hmm.
pay $11 a month for it,
Yeah.
so I'm like grandfathered in
Yeah.
under the old plans. They have new plans, and I couldn't tell you what the difference is, but
It's
um,
very close to that.
yeah, they wanted to have me in as a contributing member, but I couldn't
Mm.
actually commit to that.
Okay.
So whenever I feel like wanting to do something, I'll send Ian a text and I'll say, hey, like I'm interested in doing this. And so when
Mhm.
I can, I will. But for $11 a month, it's absolutely incredible all the information you get. And I really
Agreed.
love the Luth along. So that's where I spend most of my time with things. And
Absolutely. It made me think of, and that's the Luth group. One of your posts on Instagram turned me on to the Luth group. And I was
yeah,
like, holy crap, this exists. There's a community, and it's Luth, Looth, the Luth group.
yeah,
And I went into one of the Luth alongs, and there were a bunch of, I think the UK was logged in that day. There were about 4 UK guys. And
yeah. So
was there.
in the
Uh,
morning, you'll get a lot of the European guys.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you'll get like the UK, you'll get there's a guy named Max Monterosa, Max Monte guitars from Italy. You'll
Okay.
see Giuliano Nicoletti from Julius Guitars. And then as the day kind of goes on,
Uh-huh.
they'll leave and then you get a bunch of the West Coast guys. So
Yeah.
like Danny West and Nate Wood and
Okay.
then usually Doug Proper. He's the namesake behind the Proper Workstation.
Hmm.
Um, he'll come on in the PM, and I mean, when I'm on there, I'm drawing and doesn't really
Hmm.
like apply to
Hmm.
what the guys are doing.
Hmm.
They're doing a lot of repairs, but it's still great for the hang, especially if you're a
Yeah.
social being and you want to go and talk to some people in your lonely shop. It's great.
I have to say, I logged in because I had a question. I had a client that purchased a 2001 Les Paul Jr.
Hmm.
And he was like, I can't get the intonation right. And I said, well, it's because there's no tunematic bridge on
The
those.
wraparound,
He
yeah,
was really frustrated with it. And I wanted to suggest to him one of the wraparound bridges on StewMac, or, the other people that produce wraparound bridges. And there's different types, ones you can adjust, ones that are
hmm
pre-adjustable. And so I was in the Luth group, and I said, it was a quiet moment. And I said, hey guys, I'd like to ask a question. And I spoke up. And there were about 3 different answers. Yeah, don't get the automatically adjusted ones because obviously you're not going to be happy. And then one guy said, wait, Patrick, what year is this Les Paul Jr.? And I said, a 2001. He went, well, then who gives a shit?
yeah, exactly. Just get it good enough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So I really loved the answer. And I was like, I think I'm going to come back with questions because the varied responses, they were all very well informed and they were all very
yeah,
plausible responses. And I was able to go back to my client and say, here are some options. Which do you like? And they ended
yeah,
up changing their mind and sticking with the stop tail piece. He could care.
yeah. I mean, like that was one of like the fundamental flaws. So I worked at the Lutheran school that I attended.
Uh-huh.
Um, and they're all about like, no, there's one way to do this. There's no
Yeah.
right or wrong. There's only what we do.
Right.
And so that caused a lot of issues because people would leave and they would go and work somewhere else where they don't do it that way. So
Right.
that's kind of the reason that I say if I could go back and do it all over again and the Luth group existed, that is all I would go for.
Mm.
Um, there is so much information for every possible nook and cranny that you would need in a guitar repair or guitar manufacturing business
Hmm.
on that website. Now they have a whole website which they're slowly building up. It has like a map with like where everybody is. Um,
Right.
it has all of the information right there. Where before you kind of had to dig through Patreon to find things. There's different forums. People
Hmm.
post 3D files for
Hmm.
3D printing and
Hmm.
CNC, and like it's incredible. I mean, gone are the days where you would go and come up with something in your shop, and that's your guarded secret. Like no one is to know what that is.
Right.
Uh, and kind of stepping out of an environment where that was the case, where everything
Hmm.
that we do is close to us,
Hmm.
and moving into an environment where it's all about collaboration and working with people and making things the way that other people want them to be, not the way that you want them to be, but the way that other people want them to be, has
Hmm.
made me better as a CAD designer, programmer, that kind of thing. So it's moved me into, I mean, also through the class, but it's moved me into actually operating people's machines in other states,
Hmm.
and working with people all over the world now, either making their G code for them, setting up their machine so that they can run it whichever way they see fit. But on my side of it, I can't just say, "Well, you're doing it this wrong, so you should do it my way." Like
Hmm.
people don't want to hear that. They want to hear the like, this is how I would get my product that I'm making, not the product that Freddie Mercury is putting out. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So that has in turn made me better at modeling. Where I was before, that would have never happened. It would have always would have been, no, you got to do it our way. Like if
Hmm.
you don't do it our way, you're doing it the wrong way.
Right.
So, and
So
all that is thanks to the Luth group, meeting all those people. I mean, it's been
absolutely.
incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're gonna, and that's the beauty of it. You pick and choose the elements that you want to incorporate in your, like, the school that I went to. They have their setup. Right, here's the da 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 branded setup, and
Yep.
that I get. I completely get that. But I think what I do is I get to take. Well, how about this? And heck, I just added something to my list of my checklist of setting up a guitar.
Yeah.
Patrick's checklist now. Here's the Patrick setup. And I have to
Yeah.
ask, actually, Tom, and we'll get into CNC because I'm super fascinated by it. Um, I have an interesting tip and trick that I just learned from a guy on YouTube, and I started using it on my setups. I actually went to all my guitars and started doing it on bolt-on necks with the strings in place, fully strung up, not necessarily in tune, but the string tension in place. Take the bolts on the back of the neck and loosen them just a little bit, and it allows the neck to lock into the pocket a lot better, and then tighten everything back up. I never knew that. This guy had a whole 30-minute video on YouTube on how it just improves the playability of the guitar.
Yeah.
Factories don't keep that in mind. They don't need to. They're bolting the neck on, and then it goes to the department where the strings get put on. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just a fascinating trick. And now I've all of a sudden started doing it, and I'm really impressed. So it's just
Yeah,
one
I'm
of
gonna have to
those.
give that a try. I mean, I'm guessing it's kind of the same idea as when you like set your neck on like a acoustic, and you like most people who will voice an acoustic guitar,
Okay.
they'll string them up. At least the way that I was taught, they'll string them up and then they'll leave them on a rack for a couple days
Hanging
before
from
they
the
go in.
park.
No, just hanging it up. Not hanging it, but I mean, just putting it up on the rack, whether it be a hanging rack or it be just like a one of the
Leaning.
those slat ones.
Okay.
But what that'll do is it'll allow the top to, because acoustic guitars, your top is gonna move up, right?
Sure,
So
sure.
you have some radius built into it to kind of counteract that, plus the bracing. But there's a load that your top is going to flex under, and that load, as that comes up, so is your saddle, and your saddle's also going to rotate as well. So before they start voicing it or intonating the acoustic guitar, if they're doing one of those thicker intonated saddles,
Hmm.
they'll actually let it sit for a little bit, and then that way the wood gets used to being a guitar.
Okay.
uh,
Ooh.
and then they will go in and they'll actually carve on the braces on the inside if they find that it's too, if it's too stiff, or if they're trying
Interesting.
to get a bit more play out of the torque at the top. And then they'll let it sit again, so that way it can go and kind of hang out. So it's kind of the same idea, but I never thought about that with electric guitars. I mean, it makes total sense, right?
It
Like,
really
you
does.
got that pocket, you got to let it sit and do what it's going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, when you first do it and you loosen those bolts, you can literally feel it go, and you're like,
Yeah,
no, that's going to snap in half. But no, you're fine. It's just about a 16th of an inch, right? Let it settle into the pocket by string tension and then lock up again.
yeah, yeah.
So, Tom, did you start out as a repair specialist then? Is that my understanding?
No, no. So actually, I started by building kit guitars
Oh,
back
okay.
home in Connecticut, and I got really interested. Basically, I wanted custom shop guitars, not at custom shop prices.
Sure.
And so I bought a really cheap kit on eBay. It was a jazz bass kit, and it was weird. It was a mahogany body for a jazz bass.
Wow.
It was a maple. The maple neck and with the rosewood fretboard is actually behind me. But I built it because I was playing in my school's performing arts band, and I have a Fender jazz bass, an American Standard that I purchased way back when, and I was using that, and they were playing in E standard, but then I started playing actually in a metalcore band. So I was tuning the bass down to drop C, and
Uh,
then back on Monday going back up to E standard. And I was like, this probably isn't the best thing for this bass. So I'm gonna make one, and then that way, if anything happens to it, or I could just leave it in that tuning and be good with it. So I built it, and I used it in that band for a little bit, and then I lent it to one of my friends who played in a touring band. He played with a band called Lions, um, and they're from Rhode Island, and it came back and it was obliterated.
oh,
Like, because they're like doing like acrobatics on stage.
I,
But that gave me the itch to want to make more. So I started making more of them. I made like a Strat kit, and then I was like, well, these kits are kind of garbage, so I'm gonna move on to just like buying like Warmouth parts maybe. Or and I found this guy out of Oregon, and he still does this. His name's Richard Saylor, and he makes very, very out there electric guitar bodies. So
what's the name of his company? Like Sailor
uh,
Guitars? Or?
Saylor, and he only sells on eBay. He doesn't really have a website. I'm friends with him on Facebook, so he's got a Facebook,
Interesting.
and he has no interest in doing custom work for anybody. Like,
Hmm.
I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, I want a Mustang bass body." And he's like, "Go kick rocks." So I mean, now that I do what I do, like I I totally get how he feels on that. Uh, but so I'm still really into him. I really like emo music and alternative music, and there's a band called Taking Back Sunday. And Eddie Reyes of Taking Back Sunday played something called a TC90, which was a set neck Telecaster, but it was a double cut. It had two P90s in it, and then it was a thin line.
Wow.
And they only came in two color. And so, like, one of the things that I was really into when I was younger is finding all of like the weird Fenders that nobody knew about. So I know all the weird Fenders that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
And I was I wanted one of those, but there's only 750 of the two colors that they made of each. So finding one was really difficult, and
Uh,
they discontinued it to make the Jim Adkins signature. So that's the guy from Jimmy Eat World, and his is not a double cut. His is just a single cut, and I didn't like the way that the thin line with the single cut with the two P90s looked. So, and I also try not to buy signature guitars.
right.
So I'm like, cool, I'm gonna make one. And Richard had a two single coil thin line double cut Telecaster. It was a bolt on neck, and I was like, great, I found what I need. I'm gonna make this. And it came, and it had a beautiful figured maple top. The body was alder on it,
Wow.
and I had no interest in figured woods or any of that, so I just spray painted that sucker seafoam green. I mean, I was using the Gracie's Nitro,
Okay.
and I was making it work any which way I could. So not a proper spray booth, literally just spraying it in my basement or outside. And
Yeah.
and I made the guitar. I got a Warmoth neck for it, and I loved it. It was great. It was like everything that I wanted. Very early on, I found Porter pickups before they got big. So Brian over at Porter, he's absolutely
Nice.
awesome.
Very cool.
And he made me a set of, it's a regular Telly pickup in the bridge, but a P90 and a Telly style enclosure in the neck.
Oh,
And then I got really obsessed with
wow.
electronics and everything like that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
there's obviously a problem using a P90 in the neck with a regular Telly pickup in the bridge, because either one's going to be really muddy, and then the other one's going to sound good, or vice versa, one's going to be really ice picky and the other one will sound good.
Yeah.
So that's when I started like paying more attention to the guys in the back of the guitar stores doing the repairs. So I started paying more attention to guitar repair, and there was a guy named Jeff Moline who worked at the Sam Ash in New Haven, and he worked there forever, and he was kind of like the guy. And so I brought him this Telly, and at the time I was like, oh, you just put it together, and I didn't realize that there was all these other specs that went into putting together the guitar and going into it. Like, it's one thing to build, and it's one thing to set them up. And I just thought, you can just make it and it just goes together, but that's not the case. Though there are people that like do just make their guitars. They don't set them up.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that out much later on, but I became interested and wanted to do it. So I got Jeff to actually wire in a 470 resistor in series with the bridge pickup of this, and I still have the guitar and I still use it all the time, but I'm pretty sure it's a 470 resistor, 470k resistor, in series with the bridge pickup, and the guitar has 500k pots. And what that does is it fools the Telly pickup into thinking that there's not that pickups think, but it has a 250k pot that it's seeing. So I'm not getting that like really high end thing.
Interesting.
And yeah, so
So
it was.
If you put a multimeter on it, it'd be telling you 250, but it's a 500.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then when you're playing it doesn't sound.
What benefit would that be?
So if you were to put a Telly pickup with a 500k pot, it's gonna sound awful. It's going to sound in the bridge position. Yeah. Whereas with the P90, the P90 wants that 500k. Otherwise, a neck pickup is already going to be extremely muddy as it is.
Yeah.
So by putting that resistor in there, I don't know what it does, but it works. And so that way I can have the 500k, because, most Tellys, unless you're getting like a custom or a deluxe, you only have two knobs.
Right.
So on guitars like a Telecaster Custom, you can have the two 250Ks on the bottom for the bridge, and then you can have two 500, or in the case of the wide range humbucker, some 1 meg pots for the neck pickup, and then the pickups are seeing the pots that they want. But on a telly with only 2 controls on it, you're kind of stuck. So yeah, he did that for me, and I was so impressed. So I started paying a lot more. I started building more guitars, of course.
Okay.
And then I started paying a whole lot more attention to electronics and repairing things. And I started soldering up guitars on my own, and then learning about setup. And I started buying all the tools from StewMac, of course. And then Jeff left.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
He retired. So I was like, shit, like, what am I going to do now that Jeff is gone? And not that Jeff was ever like really too stoked to like see me. He was very nice, but I was young, like bright-eyed bushy-tail, just so excited about everything. And he's like, get out of my hair. So I grew up a little bit, and they replaced him with a guy. There was one guy in between him, and then his name was Cliff, and he was kind of like a train wreck. And then they got this guy, Jim Glinsky. And I credit Jim with putting me on the path that I'm on currently. So Jim played in a lot of local bands in Connecticut, a really good player, and he just was incredible at setups. And so he came in, I had him work on some of my guitars, and I'm like, wow, like these are so much better than what they were. Like I thought I knew a setup. And of course, you know, looking on YouTube and reading all of the books that you can, you think you know everything. And then you meet somebody and you're like, well, no, I don't know everything. So I started hanging out a lot more with Jim. And I went to college for 5 years and didn't get a degree, unfortunately. But I spent a lot of time when I wasn't going to class going to see Jim. And I learned so much from him, and I became like really, really passionate about what I was doing. Now I wanted to be a vet or a pharmacist.
I was going to ask what your major was.
Yeah, I was majoring in biology.
What school?
At Southern Connecticut State University.
Okay.
So there's like UConn, which is the north one. Then there's Eastern, Western, and Southern. So I went to Southern. And Southern was right down the road from Sam Ash, where let's just go hang out there. So I started hanging out there, and I got to know like there's a guy named Billy Morella there, and Eric DiEugenio, and a whole bunch of guys that I just became really close with, and I just kind of immersed myself much less in biology and more in guitar. And Jim would like let me sit in the back and watch what he was doing and learn a lot. And then of course Jim moved. So he moved down to Texas, and he's worked at a few shops down there. Now he's out on his own. But he does some really incredible work. And while I was there, you know, I started saying, people like, oh, like, what are you going to school for? I'm like, oh, biology. They're like, oh, what are you going to do with that? I'm like, well, if I don't make it in music, then I'm going to be a vet or a pharmacist, I guess. Okay. And so I started saying that, and my parents looked at Lutheran schools, and so they were like, "Okay, you're gonna go to a Lutheran school," and so I went out to a Lutheran school in Michigan, and I learned from a guy named Sam Guidry, and a guy named Ben Paget, and a guy named Zach Balwinski. All who are incredible builders, all who are super intelligent.
What school is it, Tom? What school?
It's the Gallup School in Big Rapids, Michigan. I learned a lot from Sam, a lot from Sam and Ben Padgett. We called Ben Sketty. And then I ended up staying there as an apprentice. And this is where it kind of turns into, I think you should totally just look at the Luth Group instead of going to a school. I went through the 6 months, and then COVID happened as I was an apprentice, and the school shut down, and the employees were asked to come back in before things could have opened. So they ended up leaving. So Sam left, Getty left, another guy named Matt left. And basically the school was left with no instructors.
Oh, wow.
So at the time, me and two other guys, a guy named Ben Kaler and a guy named Christian Cage, we were apprenticing. We were the 3 apprentices, and it was left up to us to run this school.
Wow.
And we don't have the experience to do that. The people that we were learning from, when I came in, I was supposed to learn under a guy who put his 2 weeks in, and ended up leaving the day I started. So I didn't really have any instruction. I was working in the CNC department anyways. So yeah, it was the 3 of us, and we learned very quickly.
So they already had a CNC department set up, or a division of that school.
Yeah. So I was supposed to go in and work with. They had 2 previous CNC operators and programmers in the time that I was a student. They were there, and they were gone by the time I was finished with my schooling.
Wow.
And so those guys left. One of them went off to Allied Luthery, Will Hilton, and they're doing stuff with like Paul Languedoc and Fish. They make the Iris guitars.
Okay.
They make they run Allied Luthery, and they provide services to people. And then they do Circle Strings, Fairbanks guitars. I think that's it. I don't know. They're always growing over there. So he left. And then there was another guy between me and him named Matt, who was only there part-time. And I was supposed to learn from him, and then he left. So it was just me and this CNC. Now, I had, in my high school, learned Autodesk, AutoCAD, and SolidWorks.
Okay.
So that gave me a huge leg up. And now what I'm running and what was ran at that shop is Rhinoceros 3D, which the huge difference between the 2 programs is that SolidWorks is a parametric software similar to Fusion 360. Rhinoceros is not, meaning that if you want to draw something, you have to draw the framework and then make the surfaces to go around it. Okay. You can't just say, okay, neck, make it this radius, and then boom, neck. I had to learn that.
So you have to create kind of a skeleton inner structure and then wrap. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a framework around things. And
do you think that that's a better approach than Fusion? Creating a framework, because you probably have more control over the final product.
Yeah. So the thing that there are CAD and CNC guys out there who actually know how to use Fusion. One of the best Fusion users, probably the best Fusion user that I know, his name is Brett Bailey. He's in Canada, and he runs a company called Bailey Instrumental, and he makes guitars under the name Contriver Guitar Works, or Contriver Guitars. I don't think he says Guitar Works. And if somebody comes to me and they are on Fusion, I will deflect them to him.
I was checking out Rhino 8 on their website before you and I hooked up, and it runs on the Mac and the PC.
Yes.
And what's the subscription price on that?
There is no subscription.
Is it open source? Like, are there mods and plugins?
So it runs something called Grasshopper. So you can program, if you know how to program like actual computer programs, then you can use it for that.
Okay.
But that's one of the things that, like, when it comes to Fusion, I can tell when a customer has sent me a file from Fusion because they all kind of have a look to them. They all have because they use the same plugins. So I
Not
can tell when a fretboard's been made on Fusion, and I can always
really.
tell that. And
Okay.
that's where Brett differs from people, because most builders, most people in our industry, they just want the simplest, easiest, quickest thing to go and make it, right? Like I want a bridge. I have a plugin that makes a bridge and does the string spacing and all that.
Huh.
But it makes everything all look the same to me.
Very homogeneous.
Whereas, yeah, and there's not really like a drawing aspect to it.
It needs to conform to the actual guitar, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not a cookie cutter thing.
Yeah. So Brett has gone and actually he makes like a timeline, a parametric timeline that he runs, and he makes videos on all this stuff. But he's the guy that I trust with customers that I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's nice. But and that's what's great about Fusion is that people can use it much quicker, I guess. But it tends to lead the user to not learn the full program. They just say, okay, I have my neck now, let me go. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Rhino,
fast food 3D kind of.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So with Rhino, and that's what I teach in my courses, is I break it down to, and back in the day, I did not do this. Like when I was just starting off, like I was struggling to stay above water because I was battling against deadlines that were years behind. And it wasn't like, oh, here's some time to learn this. It was like, this needed to be done last week, even though you weren't even on this project when it started. So over the years, I've developed a method in my drawing to just break things down to their simplest, and then figure out what shape the simplest is. So my favorite example would be like a fender peg head, where if you were to do this by hand, and this is where when people go and comment on my Instagram, they're like, I do it by hand. I'm like, okay, that's great. Like I did it by hand at 1.2, which is why I know how to draw it. Mm-hmm. So the swoop up into the nut and into the fretboard on a Fender peg head, it's really intimidating to look at. Like, how do I draw that in a 3D software? But if I did this by hand, I would use a spindle sander or some sort of drum sander. And so I know that shape has to be some sort of circle, right? Yeah. And if you think about what shape a drum sander or a spindle sander makes with your peg head, it makes a circle, but it also makes a flat line once you get past the actual drum. So that's what when you say
sweeping taper doesn't exist. It's more of a static.
Yeah, it's just a swoop with a line. Gotcha. So when you tell a student that, all of a sudden you see the panic in their face go away because they're like, oh yeah, it's just a straight line and a circle. So over the years, I used to make things so overcomplicated. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And I figured out much simpler ways to do things. And now that is what I've built my entire course on.
I love that guitar. I'm a Fender geek myself. I'm a heat stroke guy. And that Thin Line Series Telly is just beautiful. I love them.
Yeah, this was a cool one. I got it for somebody on Reverb was selling it for $200.
Whoa!
And,
so it's
Mexico? Yeah, it's in Mexico. It's a '69 reissue, but I changed the neck to like a channel bound one because
the binding on the neck looked different. Yeah, I figured that. Yeah, to spec.
But it's a neat one, and so I worked at school for I think 4 or 5 years.
And you were
And
instructor and sole staff member, or what? How did
no, so
that?
I taught for a very short period
Mm,
when they opened up during COVID.
okay.
And during the day I was teaching, and then at night I was running the CNC department, and it got way too overwhelming. There was way too many emotions between students who were trapped in Michigan, away from their families, and
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff. So I was like, I need to leave. I'm gonna go. And they begged me to stay, which I did, and they put another guy in there. But my job there was I made guitar parts for the guitar line made by the owner, and I also made guitar parts for various builders that fell under that umbrella.
Okay.
Um, so,
And
and
where
then
do parts? Where can you define parts?
yeah, so I would do all of the inlays. I would do all of the necks, bridges, fretboards. If they needed any tooling like molds, I would make those.
All
Um,
CNC.
all CNC. Yes,
At
everything
all
was CNC.
times, CNC.
Yep.
Mhm.
If they needed a new model, then I would draw the new model, make all of the programming for that.
For our listeners, I guess we should dummy it down just a little bit, and I apologize, Tom, but CNC is computer
Numeric
numerical
controller.
control, and it's the
So
robotics behind making cars and manufacturing appliances, and take your CAD drawn 3D model and doing what it needs to do. But in a CNC case, my understanding is it's a lot of routing tables and
yeah,
laser engraving. So you get a lot of like a PRS fingerboard with the descending birds, stuff like that that no human hand could precisely carve out. And if they did, my God, the guitars would be $20,000 a piece. CNC makes the beautiful, detailed, and more rapidly constructed, precise mathematic guitar bodies and parts.
yeah. Back in the day, it actually used to be called an NC machine before the computer aspect of it came around. So they
Ah,
would have like a Scantron, basically. Have you ever seen how like a player piano would run, where it had a
yes,
sheet, and they would feed this in,
right.
and it would basically move the machine. And
Mhm.
then they created actual computer numeric controllers. You'll see them in even the pharmaceutical industry. They have CNC pipetters. But yeah, like everything is essentially a CNC at this point
Mhm.
in a lot of manufacturing situations. But I ran Techno CNCs. They're a gantry style, which means that the X and the Z axis were on a gantry. So the left and right movement and the up and down movement were on a gantry. And then that gantry would move, and that would be your Y axis. So the forward and back.
So
Um,
almost you might want to say the gateway to 3D printing.
Yeah, so a 3D printer would be a CNC. It works the same way, except
Mhm.
a CNC is a reductive process, whereas a
Right.
3D printer would be an additive
Build up.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so rather than having a router on it, a 3D printer works the same way. You have a X and a Y that are moving
Mhm.
this head, and then either the head will move up and there's your Z, or in some cases they have a table that moves down.
Underneath the filament doing the X.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So, yeah, they're in all different forms, and it's kind of all across all industries, and that's what's kind of nice about learning it. Even if you learn how to do it in guitar making, it applies to other industries as well. So there is a guy who came through. His name's Ken Steffi from Florida, and he worked in the aircraft industry, and
Mm,
his job was drilling holes into fuselages of planes of
mhm,
aircraft.
mhm.
And he did some government contract work. A lot of the Air Force crap, the planes that we're using nowadays for defense of the United States, or fighting
Mhm.
wars, they are not just one material all the way through. They're skinned. So you might have maybe some sort of, I don't know, steel alloy on the outside, but then there's a carbon fiber skin, and then maybe there's a titanium skin, and you can't mill that in all the same speed or with the same type of bit. So
Right.
his job was doing pecking programs for drilling these fuselages. So when it came to drilling holes on his guitar, he was very particular about the holes that he would have to drill in his guitars. And so it's very transferable to a lot of things. I mean, we're dealing with things that are much more accurate than the skyscrapers you see in your cities, right? Like you would think a skyscraper, they wouldn't have much room for error with how tall it is, but in guitar making, we're dealing with stuff that's, a half a thou or a thou off, and it can really throw everything off.
Right.
So the CNC kind of takes away a lot of that, or CAD design for that matter, takes away a lot of that inconsistency that we see in guitar making. Now, people will say, well, you're taking out the human element of it, but there is still so much that you have to do on a part that's come off of a CNC that, I mean, all it really does, it doesn't do it much faster than a human would, but it allows the human to go do the things that matter. So on an acoustic guitar, a CNC could not bend your sides. You're dealing with veneers that are anywhere from 30 thou up to 90 thou thick, and it's matching your back, and you crack that once, there's nothing that will save you from that. But if you can be spending your time carefully bending these sides while your machine is maybe making your fretboard or making your bridge, it makes all the difference.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
And then when you get talking into like the voicing aspect of things, I mean, I'm really talking a lot of acoustic guitars right now, but if you go and you carve your bridge, and one bridge is made out of ebony and the next bridge is made out of rosewood, they're going to have different weights and densities and so on and so forth. And if you're making it by hand, so not only are you battling with the differences in your material properties in terms of the stiffness and the weight of the material, but if you slip with your chisel once, you've now taken more material off and made that bridge lighter. So if you're trying to build consistent guitars, then that one little chisel swipe that took off maybe 0.01 gram could change your frequency of your top and maybe put you onto a wolf note. I mean, there have been customers who have gone and put new bridge pins on their guitars because Martin sells pretty ones that have abalone inlaid in them.
Right.
And they'll come back and they'll be like, now my guitar doesn't play in tune on the G note on my A string. What's going on? And it's because your bridge pins can change the weight of the top enough so that you can push your guitar onto a frequency, and then you can produce a wolf note. So getting back to the whole CNC aspect of it, if your machine is making you the same part every single time, and now you are just dealing with the material properties rather than any sort of human error, then you're much closer to making a more consistent guitar, if that's what you're after. There are people who would happily just make an instrument that will, I can strum it around my campfire and it's great. But in the boutique market, you'll see a lot of these fingerstyle players or builders who are trying to build the most dynamic instrument they can.
Sure.
And they're pushing a lot of boundaries on that. So introducing the CNC into that process really, really helps you create that consistency that you need to make the same guitar every time.
Sure. Now, Tom, I have to ask then, it begs the question, obviously it's an industry that's advancing and changing over time, and capabilities are becoming greater and greater. Do
Hmm.
you see things like bent sides, or do you see the CNC world and CAD design overcoming that in the future? And eventually you would be able to pretty much do every element of the guitar CNC. I mean, do you think that might be possible in some way, or?
So it could lead to that, but with somebody like me who tries to CNC as much as I possibly can,
Yeah.
and from my perspective, like you can tell from my memes that I post on the social media that I like to push people's buttons. So I like to poke a little fun
Yeah.
at the people that take themselves too seriously.
Yeah.
And there are cases where I see people using a CNC for some things that I'm like, that would take so much less time if you just used a router.
Ah,
Um, so
okay.
so
So there
I
is
don't.
the old school tools that still have to come into play.
Yeah. So ironically, I love hand tools. I love sharpening. I will not buy a work sharp. I don't really have an interest in getting a work sharp. Like I have diamond stones, I have glass stones, and I will sit there until I die sharpening my chisels on those stones.
Okay.
Which is kind of like an oxymoron for somebody like me who's like, well, just CNC it all. Um, so I still love all my hand planes, all my hand tools.
Yeah,
Um, I'm very into. I just love tools. Period.
sure.
Um, so yeah, there's still a huge place for a lot of this, and there's still a lot of hand tools that I use in my CNC process
Uh-huh.
that I wouldn't use the CNC. Like it's easier for me to do this with the CNC than it is for me to do it um by like it's easier for me to do this by hand than with the CNC.
Is
So
is it easy, Tom? Like I'm thinking about bridges and nuts and inlays. Uh, is it easy to pull off one-off projects? Like, okay, I need a bridge for this Martin guitar, and then you grab your rosewood off of a shelf and just cut that bridge out of that chunk of rosewood, put the piece back, and you've
yeah,
got your, yeah. So I'm sure you
yes,
do a lot of that, right?
yeah. So like I said, I would say I'm like repair adjacent more so than like a repair professional. Um, I love to talk to people about everything and anything. Um, and I think kind of where my strong suit is matching people with the right part for the right guitar. So because of where I was, I had to keep track of a lot of things. I
Mhm.
had to keep track of different projects and different repairs and stuff like that. Though I was not physically doing the work,
Okay.
I couldn't go and make somebody 40 style Martin bridge to put on a 37. That
Mhm.
wouldn't work.
Mhm.
Um, they're very different.
Mhm.
So people have sent me plenty of bridges over my 5 years doing this, and I've had to make a lot of bridges for projects. And one of my things that people would always say to me is, well, that would take me less time to do by hand. Like you have to
Mhm.
sit there in front of your computer. And at this point, I'm really quick with bridges, but
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
would take so much less time if I just went and I knocked it out. I said, yeah, that's great. You're going to do it faster than me one time
Mhm.
because now that I have that file, I can recall that file over and over and over again, and I can make a bridge in 15 minutes.
Mhm. Mhm.
So one of the things that I would always say to people when they're like, "Well, that that makes no sense. Like you spent more time doing that than it would have taken me to do it by hand." I said, "Well, it's only stupid once."
Yeah. Right.
And so that kind of
Suddenly you have
that
a library of files, like you say, that you can go back to, and yeah.
so what I've decided to do like I figured out that I like collaborating with people a lot more than I like keeping my trade secrets. I've
Uh,
really gotten away from like, oh, nobody
it's
can
more,
know what I'm doing. Uh, because it just breeds competition.
yeah.
Like I said earlier, like I will push people to Brett all day, every day. I will find people, machinists that are closer to them to save them money. Like I don't necessarily want to be the guy that everybody comes to. I want to be the guy that can find you the right person to work with. If I'm that person, great. But there are much better suitable options for some builders that are maybe outside of the country or repair people outside of the country.
Hmm.
So I really got into the idea of collaborating with people. I've been doing a lot of stuff, virtually through. I've worked with Dusty Gregg. I work with Ben Liggett. Um, the list goes on and on and on.
You are a direct product of how you got to where you are, because you had
Yeah,
guys that shared information with you, this young kid that wanted to learn about it, and they were forthcoming with their information. So you're a direct result of sharing information. There are no tight secrets. It's a world that you can add whatever elements you want, and
exactly.
yeah.
I reached out to Ian, and what I'm working on right now is actually making that bridge library. So
Okay.
there are like I'm known as the guy that can make you the bridge, but there's all of these guys who have these CNCs in their shop, not making their own parts. Like
Hmm.
they're making charcuterie boards and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
like that's fine, but like
Yeah.
it gets to a point. Right now, I'm not doing any of the machining. Ben does all of the machining, so we make fretboards, bridges.
So you're doing
We
the
do
CAD version, and he's doing the machining, cutting, and okay,
exactly,
okay,
and then we kind of straddle the programming. So there's three aspects to making a part. You have the designer, and Ben is absolutely fantastic on Rhino. We both use Rhino. We both use Rhino Cam. He's very very talented on it, but
hmm,
he has no interest in sitting in front of his computer all day doing it. He's
yeah,
much more of a doer
yeah,
than wanting to sit there and design parts for people. So I'll design them, and then if he's swamped, then I'll do the cam for him. But he's in the process of getting a bit more steady with the cam. So he actually just took we in March I did my cam class. So I had him come through that. But I'll draw the part and then I'll send it to him and then he does all of the cam for it. So we're currently working with a company called Prismatone Pickups.
okay,
It was originally a brand owned by Baldwin,
hmm.
and they're most famous for being the pickup that uh,
Not Baldwin
Willie Nelson.
Pianos.
No, it's the same company.
Oh,
So I think they were owned by Gretsch back in the day, but they
really?
did make nylon guitars. Yeah, and they had this brass piezo pickup,
Hmm.
and the most
Under
famous,
under the bridge piezo or internal?
not under the bridge. It sits on top of a trough in the bridge,
Ah,
and the most famous Prismatone pickup user is Willie Nelson.
on trigger, of
So,
course.
so originally Willie played a Baldwin guitar, and then it
Oh,
blew up, and then he bought the Martin M20,
the
and he
trigger.
brought it to somebody, and he said, "Yep, I want the pickup from this Baldwin put in this Martin."
I got you.
But rather than having like a typical saddle, they sit on the bridge and they have adjustment screws on the back of them. Then Prismatone and Baldwin went away and nobody could get these pickups, but this guy Kelly purchased Prismatone. And every time, I haven't done it recently, but every time I would run a class, I would do a giveaway. So I'd say, hey, like my profile, like this profile, tag two friends, enters you into win. And Kelly happened to win the first acoustic class that I held. He won the free giveaway for it. So he took the class, And then afterwards, he let us know that he had purchased Prismatone and he was doing this stuff.
Wow.
So he did some designs on his own, and then he sent them to me, and then I expanded it out into. So he currently is making it for. He calls it there's the skinny Willy and the fat Willy, and they're like his own design bridge. And then he has a bridge for the Martin M20. He has a bridge for the Harmony. He has just a regular classical style. And then there is one more that's escaping me. But I think there's like 6 or 7 bridges. So I did all the design for it.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
And then I gave it to Ben, and then Ben did all of the cam, and he does the milling for them. So they'll send us a bunch of Brazilian rosewood planks, and then we just make these pickups, or the bridges for the pickups. And then Kelly was like, hey, we need one for Chris Stapleton, and we need one for Willie Nelson. So we're out here just like doing that kind of thing.
Cool,
and
very cool.
It's been very cool. Yeah. So it works out really well because it gives me more time to just do the design and then also teach the class.
Sure.
And then Ben is able to be in his shop doing what he loves to do, as well as learning it. So, and then it all applies to the guitars that we actually make.
Yeah, no doubt.
But getting back to the bridges, I talked with Ian, and I said, let's make a bridge library that's available through the Luth group. So that way people who have these machines sitting in their shop, gathering dust, we can have them making their own bridges.
That's a great idea.
I still see people wanting to come and have us make them. And a lot of people have been like, if you do that, you're just giving away customers. And I'm like, I don't think so. And honestly, like, if that's the case, good for them. Like, they're using their machines. So we made a little bit of a difference there, and they can't take that from us. So that should be coming up pretty soon.
I have to ask if, back in the day, 3D printing was quite nearly untouchable. And now anyone can buy one on Amazon for a couple $100 and you're up and running.
Yeah.
I don't know how many freaking anime figurines you'd have to make it worthwhile. But if someone were, and I'm one of these guys that's very tempted to look into it, if someone wanted to get up and running with a baseline CNC machine, like cheapest out of the box, Rhino 8, you said, there's a bit of a learning curve, but it'd be worth it in the long run. It's free software, Mac or PC. How out of the box is it for a regular average Joe, and how many months of training and cost would it be to get up and running with a CNC factory, if you will?
So Rhino they have a 90-day free trial, but the program itself costs $995 from Rhino. But then Rhino gave me a link to another website called Go Measure 3D, and they sell it for $875
for life.
That's forever. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, like for example, Michael Bashkin, he's on Rhino 6.
Okay.
And it's all pretty much compatible even as time goes.
Backward compatible?
Yeah. So he could send me stuff and then I can downgrade files to 6. So I help him a lot with stuff. Now, the one downside to Rhino is that if you were to want to use Rhino Cam, which is a separate software to Rhino, you can only use it on PC. So it is not a Mac software.
And what does that app do that Rhino doesn't do?
So there is CAD, which is the actual drawing of the part. And then there is CAM, which stands for computer-aided machining. So the drawing is considered computer-aided drafting or computer-aided design.
Okay.
And then you have computer-aided machining. And what that does is it generates the G code that tells your machine how to move. So when I teach my CAM class, I say, it's like battleships is the best way to describe it, how deep it's cutting and how fast it's moving. Now, luckily, Rhino and Rhino Cam are they require much less power than, say, Fusion 360 does.
Okay.
And also Rhino and Rhino Cam can be used offline. So if you are using Fusion you have to be connected to the internet.
Gotcha.
So you cannot be doing anything off of Fusion offline.
Gotcha.
So the other option for Mac users is something called Aspire, which
Okay.
is there's Aspire and then there's Vectric vCarve. And Vectric comes free with almost every CNC that you buy. So they just include it for free. But it's pretty limited. And then Aspire is the full version. So if you're a Mac user, I liken it to GarageBand versus Logic.
Okay.
I think Aspire is about $2,000 to get into it. And it's very, very easy to use, but it can be very limiting because it is so easy.
Okay.
So when Ben and I left, so Ben worked at Gallup as well. And when we got out of there, we made the decision that we were going to leave much, much earlier than when we actually left. We made the decision. We started gearing up to get out of there. And we got out, and we had to make the decision between either, because this is my Mac that I'm on, and I was a very heavy Mac user through college. Yeah, so when you're on Mac and you're on Apple, it's hard to go somewhere else. It is very difficult. And at Gallup, I was using a PC, so I was familiar with both. And we were kind of at a crossroads of, do we switch our CAD software to continue doing what we're doing with the equipment that we have, or do we invest in the business and purchase a PC that will do what we need to do? So Ben kind of dabbled in using Fusion 360 for a little bit, and I went over to his house, went down to his shop and was looking at it, and I'm like, I have no interest in trying to figure out. I'm so comfortable, and I can do anything that I need to with Rhino and Rhino Cam.
Okay.
Now I had the Rhino license, I just needed the Rhino Cam license. So I reached out to my friend Alec, who he works for Lockheed Martin and programs missiles, and had him build me my work computer. So
I'd like an ICBM and PC to run.
Yeah, so if he can make a missile go do what it does, I think I can trust him to make a computer for me.
Sure.
So he built me this computer. I bought Rhino Cam. So to go full bore into it, you're looking at $875 for Rhino.
Okay.
Rhino Cam standard, which is what you would need for guitar making, is $1,500.
Okay.
And then could I have gone to Walmart and bought the Walmart special gaming computer? Absolutely. But Alec, with my computer spec'd out the way that it is, I paid $2,300 for it.
Okay.
But it's completely modular, so now I can pull parts out and put new parts in as needed. And then for the machine, Ben bought a Gemnitsu, and I don't know the model of it, but you put it together yourself. It comes in a kit, and it's completely modifiable into whatever shape and size you need. So we got like the super mega extendo kit, and we put it together, and Ben built something called a torsion box. So Ben is very, very crafty. He is probably the smartest person I know. He's very quiet. He won't tell you he's the smartest person. I'll tell you that he's the smartest person though. And he built this torsion box, and then he put like aluminum extrusion into it.
Wow.
And then I helped him with the whole. He put like airlines into it. We have a whole vacuum system now,
Wow.
and so we took the system that I was running at Gallup and basically made it what we wanted it to be. So we didn't have anybody telling us what to do, so we could do whatever we wanted.
Cool.
And so we took this little, I think you can get the Genmitsu machine for maybe the one that we got for $900 or something like that.
Wow, very interesting.
So it's very, very cheap. Yeah. And then you can kind of make it into whatever you want.
How do you choose the signature table of a CNC?
So,
'Cause 3D printers come from everything to a shoebox to, supersize 4x4 or whatever. I mean,
so we bought the Gimnitsu without, like, we got the biggest one that we could find. We probably honestly could make it bigger if we wanted, but for what we're doing, it ended up being worth it for the size that we got. Um,
basically, it's a cross, and in the middle of the cross is your router tool. I'm being super basic about it, but that cross, it picks those areas where the router should be. Are those cross beams retractable? Are they
so
expandable to
you
scale?
can get, because a lot of them, like the more basic ones, are just aluminum extrusion.
Okay.
And there's something called a ball screw, and that's something that you want to look for in your machines. You want to have ball screw driven machines. The new thing that everyone is really heavy on is linear rails, which will add rigidity to the machine.
Oh,
But the more length you have across something, the less rigid it will be. I
makes
mean,
sense.
yeah, like with anything, yeah. And so we bought like this extender, and I don't think we extended the gantry, but we extended the length of it. So they come in the most common size that you'll see. Like if you were to buy a Shapeoko, or you were to buy like a One Infinity, or any of the stuff that you commonly see in like Woodcraft, they sell like the CNC Shark. They'll usually be like 2x3 or 2x4, or
wow.
yeah, that'll be your typical desktop. Some people don't need much more than that. Like if you just wanted to make rosettes and electric guitar bodies, you can make those all day long on that machine. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to deciding what you should be looking at, you have to think about what you're going to make. And that's always what I tell people. And the number one thing that you are going to run into and have a problem with is going to be Z-axis height. So that is the up and down travel of the router. And that is very important for a few reasons. But the biggest reason is if you're trying to make acoustic guitar necks, the heels are very tall. They're like 4 inches.
Good point.
So you need to have enough room. If you're gonna mill it with the heel sticking up, you need to have enough room for the heel to exist and the bit to exist, but also enough room for that bit to travel over the top of the heel. So if you have a 4-inch bit exposed out of your collet and you have a 4-inch heel, you got 8 inches there.
Right.
So that can lead into a lot of problems. Now,
interesting.
Yeah, and so the machine that I've kind of been pushing a lot of people towards, who are taking it professionally, who are builders who are making guitars in the $5,000 up range, and this is the only job that they have, I push them towards the Laguna IQ Pro.
Okay.
You can get a fully stocked IQ Pro for about $17,000. That's with a vacuum table. It has
Sure.
the gantry is tall enough to do everything, and that's with the 5-tool ATC, which is an automatic tool changer. What's kind of cool is, and most people don't know this, Laguna has one guy who is guitar specific.
Oh wow!
His name's Tim Chambers, and I found him through James Gregg of Gregg Guitars, and Tim has been absolutely amazing. So Laguna has a really bad reputation of having bad customer service and not supporting their products, but that comes as a surprise to me, because every time I've needed something from Tim, he has always been right there to it. So some of my customers own Laguna machines, and the way that I locate parts on the machine is a bit different than a lot of people. And everything that we've needed from Tim, we get it within the next day.
Wow.
So if anybody is considering doing anything with Laguna and they're reading the bad online reviews about Laguna, ignore those. Contact Tim Chambers. He's been like absolutely incredible. But that IQ Pro, I mean, it is the do-wall machine for guitar makers, and everyone sees that price tag of $17,000. But with everything that you can make and everything that you're not having to buy because you have it, I think it's absolutely worth it. You can make that money back very, very quickly if you're producing instruments or you're doing repairs or whatever you're doing with it. So
absolutely. And if you're that go-to guy, you pay for itself.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
I have to ask, Tom, you have on your Instagram here, I'm looking at it, 3 courses coming up, and they're CAD courses.
Yep.
So basically what you're asking is these, and I'll call out some dates here. You have an online acoustic guitar CAD course that you call out April 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th.
So it's 5 weekends with 2 days a weekend.
Oh, so you need to show up for all of those dates.
Yeah, it's 40 hours.
Yeah, I feel as much. It's intense stuff.
Yeah. So like I said, like I've learned being out on my own that being accessible and being like kind of this person that people can go to is much better than being Mr. Secretive. So I show everybody everything that I know. There is nothing that I don't like. I'm not like, oh, this is my little top secret thing. And it's intense. The courses are designed for absolute beginners. So I've had students who have never worked on a guitar in their life. They just play them and they take the courses and they've designed guitars. But we go through everything from 2D design all the way up into 3D design. We talk about tool making. We talk about multi-scale instruments. We talk about everything. And I keep it really affordable.
Yeah, it says here $375 to the public.
Yep.
And if you're a member of the Luth group on Patreon, you get a discount. It's $325. That's not bad. And then you reach out to Tom at Frettie Mercury, Frettie, FrettieMercury.com, Tom at FrettieMercury.com. And you have an acoustic course consisting of four different sections, if you will. You have an electric guitar CAD course and an online instrument making CAM course. So same price on all of those, $375 to the public, $325 if you're a Luth group member.
Yeah. Yep.
Very
now
cool.
the CAM course is like the level 2 course of everything. So you would have to take either the acoustic or the electric design course before you could take that CAM course. But yeah, we have a really good time. I'm starting the acoustic one in April. That one is really, really good for anybody who is wanting to do small parts on the machine all the way up to doing the whole guitar on their machine. And it's some good information. I've seen some of my students do some really, really good, really intense stuff that I've been really happy with. So if I can make a difference, then that's all I'm after.
Absolutely cool. And you know, the funny thing that I'm relating to what you're saying about you're doing this, you're doing that, you're, repairs kind of on the side, but then you're doing the CNC and the CAD design and the courses. The one downfall that I've found about diving into the business aspect of guitars is I have a hell of a lot less time playing.
Yeah.
you run into, I mean, that's kind of the irony of it. It's like, oh, I want to dive in and just go further with this beautiful thing that I've been so involved with for most of my life. You start reaping the benefits, and it starts suddenly playing takes a back seat to the other part. I find the most playing I get is when I plug in customers' guitars to test them out before they come pick them up.
And make sure they work.
Great guitar. Like the other day, a guy gave me an EVH
Strat. And I was like, dude, this plays amazing. And then he came and picked it up, and I almost had a little bit of a pain in my heart, like, maybe I should go buy one. Or, but then if I did, I wouldn't have time to play it. So,
like this desk that I'm sitting at is actually like, I have a Kemper, I have all my recording stuff, and I'm just like, there's guitars everywhere sitting on this desk from like, oh, I was gonna finish this song out. Like, it's been a month. Like, I might as well just put them back in the case. So I try to give myself like a little bit of time, but I spend so much time just working on the other stuff.
Absolutely. Every time I walk into my office, they're all lined up on the wall, and they're like, Patrick, come play me. No, play me. I'm the new Les Paul. Come play me.
Yeah.
I have to ask, Tom, what's your experience with, and this could be a side conversation, but what's your experience at the Kemper? Do you like profiling? You getting into it?
Yeah. So I to the left here, I have like a Supro Statesman. I have a orange Rocker 30. Behind this this is a big backdrop that I bought for photography and all that. Okay. And then I do some videos playing. But there's like an SVT Classic behind here.
Nice.
So I was really heavy into the tube amps. And, I had a pedal board with all the Strymon. I still have it, all the Strymon stuff on it. And then I bought the Kemper because when I worked at Gallup, they have housing, and the staff lives in the housing.
Right.
And it's like you're on call 24 hours a day. Yeah. But the house that it wasn't even a house, it was a trailer that I lived in.
Yeah.
They're very, very close. It was in a trailer park. So not being able to play one of those amps at full volume is kind of criminal. I bought the Kemper because I used to just plug the Strymon stuff is great because if you have the Big Sky, it works. It has like a cab simulation on it.
Absolutely.
And so I was using that straight into like an Apollo, and then I'm like, this is like such a stupid setup I should just get a Kemper. So I bought a Kemper.
Cool.
And it's been awesome. Like, I
pretty happy with the results then?
Yeah. And I mean, I can play it quietly. I have the powered version. So also behind here, there's a Friedman cab and 212 that I'll plug it into when I do play out live. But yeah, I mean, it's worth every penny. Like what you can get in other people's profiles, and I've made my own as well. So there's an amp maker here in Michigan named Tom Hull of Hull Amps, and I have a few profiles of his amps. So like I'm able to get my hands on real amps, and I mean, when I want to, like, I have all the other amps in flight cases for when I play out.
Sure.
And having to pull them out and set it up, and like if I wanted to go play right now, I just turn on my interface and I turn on the knob, and then I'm good to go.
There you go. Yeah.
So, and then I also record music for Mighty Tortuga. It's my friend Jake Berberich. I've played music with him for a long time. And when I moved out so I live in Michigan full time. I'm in Big Rapids.
I was going to ask. I kind of assumed that you stayed in Michigan after the school.
Yeah. So I'm still here. Ben lives in Everett, so he's like probably a half hour away. So it makes no sense for me to go somewhere else when I'm working with him.
Okay.
And so, I come out here, and then not being able to record stuff because I can't go and plug these amps in the trailer park was kind of a little bit of an issue. So I'm still able to record bass, guitar, everything for them. So I'll write demos for them, or I'll play keys on their stuff, guitar, anything. Nice. So Jake and I are able to go back and forth, and it works amazing. And we put out some good music. They got signed by Fred Mascherino from Taking Back Sunday. He used to be in Taking Back Sunday, started his own record label, and so they're signed by them. I grew up listening to Taking Back Sunday, so like Fred Mascherino's hearing the music that I wrote, so I'm good with that. Let's go.
So you are finding time to get some playing in. That's good.
Yeah, if Jake will send me a demo on my phone, and I'll listen to it, and I'll say, okay, like send me the stems if I'm interested in playing on it. And then I'll just take it off of here. I'll write whatever part I'm going to write for it, whatever they need from me. I send it back, and either they'll re-record it, or Jake really likes to reamp things, so he has a Kemper as well.
Okay.
So that's really nice, because all of the tones that I use for the recording, I can just send it to him. There you go. That's my tone for the song.
Perfect.
But I take a straight clean signal off of the Kemper as well. So it's just the guitar DI.
Okay.
And I'll send them that as well.
Okay.
And then he can plug his Kemper. He can plug his Kemper into his computer, and you can reamp with it.
Very cool.
So if he doesn't like the tone that I chose, then he can go and he can change it to whatever he wants. Doing that, and I've done that for a few different bands. So I actually own 52 guitars specifically for that.
Wow.
So I have, I feel that the song needs, Gatelli. Like, I've been using this thin line for a while, but behind the backdrop, there's a Tele Deluxe that I'll use for a lot of stuff. I have this little Mustang 90. It was like a cheap guitar, but it sounds great. And then I have a bunch of Gibsons and Music Mans and Rickenbackers and all the expensive stuff underneath the staircase over here. So
Rickenbacker, you stuck with bass a little bit as from back in the day, or Rickenbacker?
Yeah, I have both.
Okay.
I have a 4003 bass, and then I have a 4001 that was my Uncle Mike's, and it's a regular 4001, and he bought it because he thought Paul McCartney played a 4001. And Paul McCartney actually played a 4001S,
gotcha,
which was like the cheaper model, didn't have the Rico sound and all that. And
I think Lemmy played the 4001.
Yeah, a lot of the old timers played the 4001s. But what ended up happening was the Beatles went over to India, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to take all the finish off of our guitars."
Yeah, right.
And so John took all the finish off of his Casino. George took everything off of his Strat, and then ended up painting that, and that's how we got his like crazy. It even has a name. I think it's Rocky. I think is the name.
That sounds right. Rocky Raccoon. Yeah.
And then Paul took the Maple Glow finish off of his 4001.
Okay.
So my uncle bought this 4001
gotcha,
in Maple Glow.
Okay.
So my 4003 is also in Maple Glow, and then I own a 360 that is also in Maple Glow.
I've never picked up a Rick bass, but I've always wondered, what is the Rico sound?
So the Rico sound is the ability to make the instrument play in stereo to two different amps. So basically you would have a regular cable, and you can plug a regular cable right into it,
mm-hmm.
and it'll play in mono. And then you have the toggle switch to do the bridge, both, or the neck.
Mm-hmm.
But if you plug in the second cable, it changes. There's like this little plunger on the inside that switches. It almost looks like a railroad like juncture thing. And it what it does is it sends the bridge pickup to 1 amp, and then it sends the neck pickup to a different amp.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't use it. I never use it.
I wonder if any recordings that, I guess they'd hate that in the studio, but live it might be interesting to.
Yeah, the most famous person that uses it doesn't even play a Rickenbacker. Billy Sheehan, he has that Yamaha Attitude bass, and it does the same thing.
Really?
Yeah. So
this is just weird all around. The scalloping on the neck, and
the partial scalloping, but so he's got that bass set up like a Rickenbacker. So one of the pickups goes to 1 amp, and one of them goes to a different one. So when you look, you see he has two cables coming off of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the guitars do it too. But
really?
they have a blend. Yeah, they have a blend knob, and the blend knob is kind of weird. I mean, Rickenbackers are just weird. Don't buy them. Just don't.
I completely agree with you.
Do not buy them.
Worst design guitars ever.
Yeah, they're awful. Everything about them is just awful. But they have that sound that's like nothing else sounds like it. So
Well, yeah, like the birds with the 12 string. I mean,
yeah, I would, if I were to have one guitar, a Rickenbacker would not be.
Right.
But when I do need it, it is nice to have it there. But
Sure.
like the blend knob on the guitar does weird things in like the mono setting that just I still haven't figured out what it does. And but and their hardware is awful, so
Yeah.
they do the basses have a hollow bridge with foam mutes in them, so they kind of have like these like little trivet things, and there's like two little thumb screws, and you adjust it and it pulls this foam up into the strings so you can get like the muted sound. But yeah, but like what's great about that is you can't like regularly palm mute on it because the strings are going through this whole contraption, so you can't get your hand on it. So I've taken that off of both, and they also do this thing. Anybody who's worked on a Rickenbacker bass, the strings come in through the back of the bridge, but it's just the cast aluminum bridge.
Okay.
So it's not very strong, and it will actually do this spoiler thing, and it pulls up the bridge.
Oh, no.
And you know how people are about originality. So I took both of the bridges with the mute system out of my basses, and I put on a hip shop bridge.
There you go.
They make a brass and aluminum version of the Rickenbacker bridge without the mutes.
Okay.
And so those will not bend, hopefully.
Okay.
And but yeah, since however long they've been making Rickenbackers, they made those bridges that way, and they all do it. And they're like, nah, we're not going to fix it. And it wasn't until 2017 what they did to fix it was they bolted on like a bar of steel or brass onto the body that exists underneath where the strings go through. So the strings go through the same bridge, but they just get stuck into this bar, and like that was their fix, which it fixed it.
Interesting.
But it's like, why not just make a better bridge? So I mean, that's what I would do.
Yeah, I saw the most interesting device the other day. A customer emailed me asking, "Look, I want to put a Floyd Rose on my Les Paul," and right away I'm moaning and groaning. I'm like, really, please, just don't mess up your Les Paul. Honestly, go buy a Jackson or something with a Floyd Rose.
Yeah,
and Floyd Rose developed it, I believe, and it flush sets to the Les Paul, so you don't have to, and it uses the existing ports.
Yeah.
And it's the most ingenious invention. And I actually forwarded the customer. I said, I don't have a router, so I can't. Yeah, but if you really want to keep your Les Paul pristine and have the ability to put it back original, if you want to get rid of it, do this exactly. And I think it's a really genius idea.
That's like if you've ever seen the Vibramate. So Bigsby's, there is. Oh, I'll tell you a story about that too. So if you install a Bigsby on a guitar, you have to drill holes into it.
Yeah,
and
right on the end.
Yeah, and also on the face of it.
Oh, geez.
So they created there's a company called Vibramate, and they make a plate that allows you to mount the Bigsby to the existing stud holes, and it works perfectly.
Smart.
But Ben and I used to make the Erlewine Strats and Bs. So Dan Erlewine made a guitar for Jerry Garcia during the 70s, but Jerry received the guitar in the 80s. And it was made out of black walnut. It had a Tune-O-Matic bridge on it. It had a rosewood pickguard. It's one of the lesser known Garcia guitars. Ben and I were making those, and Dan also made a guitar for Albert King called Lucy.
Yeah, the beautiful flying V. Yeah.
Yeah. So the one that Stu Mac is like currently posting about, like with Blake and all them, Ben and I made that guitar.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah. So we had, before we left, we had gotten it to the point where the neck was ready to get glued in. So Ben had done all the binding on the guitar, did all the routing for that. But Dan held on to the wood that he made that guitar out of, and it's just black walnut.
It's gorgeous.
We were making the replicas out of that wood. And during COVID, Joe Bonamassa ordered one of the guitars. So this was before Ben was making them. Zach Balwinski was making them with me. And we made a guitar for Bonamassa. And instead of it saying Albert King on the fretboard, it said Joe Bonamassa on the fretboard.
Okay.
It was original wood. He sent us original pickups and hardware and everything that would have gone into a V. So we put all that in. We had to like rewind the pickup and everything. And then when he came around to Grand Rapids, we went and we saw him. So we went and we got backstage. Dan and Stumac had us go backstage, which was great. And Joe has a Les Paul that he calls Snakebite. And so he pulls out this 59 Les Paul and he says, this is Snakebite, blah, 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 tells us about it. And someone goes, it's got holes in it. It's got holes. Why has it got holes in it? It's 59. Why does it have holes in it? And Joe goes, well, like somebody put a Bigsby in it. And it had a Bigsby. And those are the holes from the Bigsby. And I had it taken off.
Sure.
And I left the holes there because I like it. Like, and I call it Snakebite. And it looks like it has snake bites in it.
Yeah.
So, so, you know, it's funny, like nowadays we think of problems where we're like, well, we don't want to drill into this guitar. And like, they have all these problems with these instruments and people have come up with such smart things. Like this Telly, you know, nobody would be able to tell that it's modified, but I have Callahan modded saddles on this.
Oh, you went back to the original saddle look.
Well, no, it's a 3-barrel. And this guitar came with the 3-barrel with the steel saddles, not the brass ones. But Callahan makes a modded, you can't really see it on the camera, but these are all intonated, which is really nice.
Oh,
nobody notices it.
They look vintage. They look vintage.
Yeah, but I mean, so there's all these problems that have gone unfixed for many years. And then people have come up with incredible ideas to like fix things. Like this has the Fender staggered tuners on it, so you get a better break angle over the nut.
And that string tree isn't a standard Telly string. It looks like almost like
no, it is.
Yeah,
this is the vintage style one. So I don't like the wing style ones because they bind.
No doubt, there'd be traction on that. I have an '80s Japanese Strat, and it had the rollers string trees.
Yeah,
I love those.
Yeah, I'll either put these little circular ones on it because they're like a direct replacement.
Yeah,
but Fender has those little like
there's a lot of looks like the friction of the string hitting the edge of that metal would just be
so I remove those every single time. But they have another one that they put on like the American guitars, but you have to have there's a screw, but there's like a little nub that goes in. So those are a little bit more difficult to install. So if they don't already have that on it, I'll just put one of these round ones on. But like it's cool. Like so many people are coming up with great ideas for like the fractal fret press that Edward, I forget his first name. It's Jeremy. It's Jerame. I don't know if he pronounces it Jeremy or Jerame.
Okay.
But he made this fret press that it just conforms to whatever radius.
You had a post on Instagram.
So that thing is amazing. And so I really want to get one of those. I've had a lot of people come up with like little things that they wanted. So there's a company out of Kansas City, and they wanted, because they do their brand is Scythe Guitars. They finished their fretboards. So they've had me make radius gauges that are small enough to get sandpaper to wet sand in between the frets, but it keeps the right radius. So they had us make those. We posted about them, and we've had a few people get them. But just recently, our friend James Gay he's now the head of the custom shop at GNL. He ordered a bunch of them, and so GNL is using them now. And it's literally just a radius gauge that it's just small enough to get in between the frets, and you can get some sandpaper underneath it. But it's just little things like that that make people's lives so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what we're after. We made, and it's available on the Luth group. Ben went through and designed double-edged radius gauges. So the StuMac radius gauges, which I don't think I have mine out here, they're great. But the problem is that they're only, like, the only usable side of it is that bottom side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are great, but trying to do a saddle or trying to do the radius of a nut, you kind of have to like hold it right on the edge of the nut. So what we did was we made these radius gauges that are not only concave, but they're convex as well. So that way you can put the gauge onto the nut and it just slides up, and then you can trace it on the top. So see that top edge of that gauge there?
Mm-hmm.
So that top part is built into the gauge. So that way you can use that to do the saddle or the nut.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we made that available. That is free on the Luth group. That's on their website. There's a Luth prints for that. You can either CNC it out or you can 3D print it out. So
do you have anyone that's CNC, where if you were to source out, besides the guy that you're affiliated with, say you were a layman just starting out and you had some great 3D designs that you wanted printed, or I guess CNC'd, excuse me, where would you send that person to have that item CNC'd, and what's the turnover rate?
There are plenty of online places. Like I think there's one called like Send Print Send or something like that. And they'll make you stuff. 3D printing is like incredibly affordable in terms of having materials made, because like the PLA, it only costs a couple cents to make things.
Yeah.
And at this point, printers are only like $200. Like Ben has a 3D printer that we use we actually use it in tandem with the CNC. So we'll make like vacuum chucks with the 3D printer to hold guitar parts in place on the CNC.
I've seen those in action. They're really trippy.
Yeah,
it's all
great.
The air out and holds everything together.
Yeah,
gluing bodies together, and
we use it like one of my customers in Nashville. Like we use it to hold his peg head in place when he's milling his neck and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
But there are a lot of different places that you can get guitar parts like made. Like Allied Luthery will make them. If you're looking for like inlay work, there's a place in Maryland called Olson Inlay. They are super badass. Their entire shop is female run. They do or not all of them, but they do a good portion of the PRS Dragons. They're awesome. They have one guy that works there. It's Jamie's father's name is Doug Olson, and they make their own CNCs. So they literally will make they'll make CNCs with 5 different spindles on them, so they can do 5 times the work. And we went out there and did a lot of, like, we spent I think like 4 days out there with them, just hanging out in their shop. Super cool. But like there are plenty of people that offer services like that. But for like, if you're trying to get one-off 3D printed stuff, you can just search online like 3D printing services and people will do it.
If you were to start 3D printing, like I've thought about it, 3D printing nuts and bridges and saddles for acoustic guitars, etc. If I was to start 3D printing, what PLA would you suggest that I get into? Obviously, the wound strings are going to be grinding through that thing. I mean, what's the most durable?
I wouldn't personally 3D print like bridges or saddles or nuts or anything like that, just because they're usually somewhat hollow on the inside.
Oh, gotcha. That's right. It creates a infrastructure and wraps.
Yeah.
Very true. It's not a
Yeah.
solid material.
So, but for like calls and stuff, we're using PLA. You'll see some people will actually use polycarbonate. Polycarbonate is great for everything. Like we love to make templates out of that.
Okay.
But resin printers seem to be like the next thing on everybody's radar.
Wow.
I personally don't do all too much with the 3D printing except modeling stuff to be 3D printed. But yeah, I mean, you can make so many great tools with it though, and it's super lightweight. And you know, if you dicker it up, you could just make another one. The only bad thing is they take quite a bit. CNCs are a bit more instant in terms of gratification there, but yeah,
For
I mean,
solid parts, resin printing would be the place to go.
yeah, yeah,
And hopefully
absolutely.
resin printing will be just as price competitive in the future as it expands.
Yeah, it's a bit more expensive right now,
Okay.
big time.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. Like the guy that I learned everything from, Sam, one of the students actually gave him this little rinky dink. It's a X Carve. It's made by Carbide 3D. Inventables is, you see a lot of ads for them.
Okay.
And like the guy had it, and then he bought a Shop Saver and just gave Sam this little rinky dink machine that was just for like the Etsy mom. And like he's making tuners and he's making like all this other stuff. And this machine is like, please just let me die. And he just like keeps adding stuff to it. And he's doing like incredible stuff on it. Like he's doing really, really cool stuff on that machine. And every time I see it, it's all torn apart because he's constantly modifying it, but it works.
Yeah.
So he's making his own. He uses something called makumegane, which is like it's a folded metal. And it's almost like Damascus, but it's like hand turned, and rather than it being layered, it's like twisted. Ken Parker uses it a lot on his arch tops, and Sam is making tuner plates out of it. He's making like inlays for his guitars, and then he's making his own tuner buttons. And
cool.
So yeah, and he's like, "Hey, I did this with my machine. It didn't break." And I'm like, it's always followed by like, "It didn't break."
Right.
So,
pushing it to its limits.
Yeah.
So, Tom, your classes, we've called out your courses. People can find the schedule and the prices on your Instagram, Frettie Mercury, or Frettie, on Instagram. Find him on the Luth Group, Looth, the Luth Group, Patreon. It was funny. I was in one of those Luth gatherings. What are they called again?
The Luthalong?
Luthalon. And Ian was about to, he was hosting, obviously, like he does a lot of them. And it was going to be some guy in the UK with his repair shop, and he was going to give a tour of his repair shop. Really cool. And I logged in and I was going to watch it. So Ian was trying to get him on the right camera, right? And suddenly there's Dan Erlewine sitting in his studio, and he's like, oh hi. Hold on, I'm sorry, that's not the guy. And I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna hang out just because Dan Erlewine's hanging out. I mean, this guy is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of guitar maintenance, and it's just incredible.
Yeah,
I have the utmost respect for Dan Erlewine, and Tom, thanks for sharing your story, man. It's fantastic and multifaceted. And I swear we're gonna have to have a part 2, because I'm sure you got a tons more you can talk about.
Yeah, but I'm certainly a talker.
Yeah. No, I love it. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I didn't know what to expect, because I know there's a bit of tongue in cheek on your Instagram, and I'm like, this guy's a little ruffian. I don't know if he's going to be a good guest, but you've been phenomenal. Thank you. So I'm going to wrap it up with the question that I ask everybody: the repair guys, the collectors, musicians. What are the 3 guitar tunes that you would put on your Desert Island mixtape?
Okay, this is so you sent me this, and I've been thinking about this all week.
And so it's funny because a lot of people put a lot of thought into it, and I thought it'd be just kind of a, oh, that's easy, But
yeah, and like I thought about this all week, and it's super tough. So
It is.
I'm just going to say I narrowed it down to the songs that like I was most proud of learning. So I'm going to say the
Good.
intro to Here Comes the Sun. I think that is a good one.
Awesome.
It's not as easy as everybody thinks it's going to be. It sounds like it's easier, but it's not.
Awesome.
I'm going to say Paris by the 1975, which is more of a pop song.
Cool. I like the 1975 stuff.
Yeah. And I'm gonna say the last one for all of the emos at heart is I'm gonna say Dead by My Chemical Romance, because learning that and then just that, I mean, that whole album is great, but I think out of all of the songs on that album, that is definitely my number one. So
awesome. Great choice. Does he have on the, does he do a drop C tuning on that? Or is it
no, so it's all in standard. That whole album is in standard, which is nuts. So
interesting.
yeah, and he's playing that on a Junior, and like it's just a vintage Junior, and it's so rock and roll, and like you can hear it's out of tune, and it's great. Like sign me up for that.
Who did the guitar on Here Comes the Sun? Was that George or Paul?
That was George.
Okay.
And that's like capo 10 on that, which is why it's really high up there. And but yeah, like that was one of the ones that growing up I'm like, I'm gonna learn how to do this. I can't play the rest of the song. I can play the intro very well, but I had no interest in learning the rest of the song the rest of the song because the intro is like so good. So if I can do that, everybody knows.
Yeah, it's like when I learned how to read tablature back in the 80s. Guitar Player magazine had the tablature for Black Star by Yngwie Malmsteen. So I know how to play the classical guitar intro, but the rest of the tune there's no way I can do that.
Exactly.
Look at it, it's a 24, 32, 20, 12, 13, 12, 13, 14, 14, 15. No, then I'm not going to be able to figure that out.
Listen, nowadays, all you need is 90 seconds. That's all that Instagram and TikTok cares about.
That is absolutely sad but true. That is sad but true. I have to ask then, so are you a Beatles fan then?
Yeah. My dad is really into the Beatles, and my uncle obviously is very into the Beatles. So I've kind of grown up on them. I've been to Liverpool.
Nice.
I've done the whole 9 yards. So I remember, my favorite movie when I was little was Yellow Submarine. So and I had it on the yellow VHS tape too.
Wow.
So yep.
And I ask every Beatles fan then, are you a Paul guy or a John guy?
Definitely a Paul guy.
Yeah, me too. He's such a great songwriter.
Yeah. And he was like a much better person too. So like there's that. I used to be much more into John, and then like I did the tour in Liverpool, and like the people out in Liverpool are like, yeah, he was a piece of shit. So
really?
Yeah. I mean, like, if you saw like how he came up, like the way that he kind of acted growing up or like as a musician really doesn't make much sense. So like he had it pretty good.
Tom, thank you again. I appreciate your time. It's gone way beyond the amount of time that I allotted on our calendar. Thanks, man. I'll see you on the Luth group.
Yeah. Nice talking to you, Patrick.
Take care, brother.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.